Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the stars drift past the viewing window. His ship moved through space at a steady pace toward the Outer Rim territories where few beings dared to travel. The Liberty was an exploration vessel built for long journeys and peaceful contact with new species. Jake had been commanding this ship for 8 years and had never fired a weapon in anger. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her tactical station running routine scans of nearby space. She was young for her rank, but had earned her position through skill and dedication. Amy came from a military family, but had never seen real combat. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that most humans her age had never experienced war. Chief, Engineer Ben Carter worked in the engine room, keeping the ship running smoothly. He was a quiet man who preferred machines to people, but was loyal to his crew. Ben had served on dozens of ships over his 20-year career and had seen humanity grow from newcomers to respected members of the galactic community. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for nearly 200 years. During that time, humans had built a reputation as peacemakers and problem solvers. They were the species other civilizations called when they needed help settling disputes or finding creative solutions to complex problems. Other species in the galaxy often called humans the quiet giants. Humans were larger and stronger than most alien races, but they rarely used their physical advantages. Instead, they preferred to talk through problems and find ways for everyone to benefit. Many alien species joked that humans were too soft for real warfare. Jake walked over to Amy's station and looked at her scanner readings. Space in this region was mostly empty except for a few small asteroids and gas clouds. They were heading toward a distant star system that had recently been colonized by the Zalari, a peaceful amphibian species known throughout the galaxy for their medical knowledge. The Zalari had been Federation members for over 300 years and had never been involved in any conflicts. They spent their time developing new healing techniques and medicines that helped countless species across the galaxy. Their colony world was meant to be a research station where they could study rare plants and minerals. Amy suddenly sat up straighter at her console. Her instruments had detected something unusual in the space ahead of them. She ran the scan again to make sure she was reading it correctly. The results were the same. "Captain, I am picking up a distress signal from the Zalari colony," Amy reported. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the concern underneath. Jake frowned. The Zalari almost never had emergencies. They were careful planners who prepared for every possibility. If they were sending a distress signal, something serious had happened. "Put it on speakers, Amy," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with static and broken voices speaking in the musical language of the Zalari. The universal translator worked to convert their words into English, but the signal was weak and kept cutting out. "Help us, please. Ships came from nowhere. They are destroying everything. So many dead. Please, someone help." The message, repeated several times before cutting off completely. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The Zalari colony was supposed to be in a safe area of space, far from any known threats. "Ben, get us to maximum speed," Jake called to the engine room. "Amy, try to contact Federation Command and let them know what we found." The Liberty accelerated toward the Zalari system while Amy worked to boost their communication array. Long-range bow. Messages took time to reach Federation headquarters, but they needed to report this situation as soon as possible. As they traveled, Jake thought about the implications of what they had heard. If someone was attacking the Zalari, it meant there was a new threat in the galaxy. The Federation had military forces, but they were designed more for keeping peace between member species than fighting unknown enemies. 3 hours later, the Liberty dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zalari system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go silent. The colony world that should have been green and blue was now brown and gray. Smoke rose from burning cities, and the orbital stations that once processed medical supplies were nothing but floating debris. Ships moved in the upper atmosphere, but they were not Zalari vessels. Amy ran scan after scan, trying to understand what had happened. The readings showed massive damage from orbital bombardment and clear signs that ground forces had attacked the population centers. Whoever had done this had used overwhelming force against a defenseless target. "How many survivors, Captain?" Jake asked quietly. Amy checked her instruments again, hoping she had made a mistake. The numbers did not change. Life signs show maybe a few thousand people scattered across the planet. The colony had over 2 million Zalari when we last received reports. Jake stared at the ruined world below them. In all his years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The Federation had rules about warfare and protecting civilian populations. Whoever had attacked the Zalari had ignored every law and treaty that civilized species followed. The peaceful galaxy that humanity had known for 2 centuries had just become a much darker and more dangerous place. Jake Morrison ordered his crew to begin rescue operations immediately. The Liberty moved into orbit around the devastated Zalari world, while Ben Carter worked to boost their scanning equipment. They needed to find survivors quickly before whoever had done this decided to return. Amy Rodriguez coordinated with the ship's medical team to prepare for casualties. The Liberty was not a hospital ship, but they had enough supplies to help several hundred wounded beings. She kept running scans of the planet's surface looking for life signs while monitoring space for any approaching threats. Down on the planet, Ben Carter led a rescue team through the ruins of what had been the main research city. The buildings were crushed and burned with clear signs that heavy weapons had been used against civilian targets. Bodies of Zalari researchers lay scattered in the streets where they had tried to flee. The attack had been systematic and brutal. Medical facilities were specifically targeted and destroyed. Research labs containing decades of scientific work were reduced to smoking craters. Someone had wanted to eliminate not just the Zalari colony, but all the knowledge they had gathered. 2 days into the rescue operation, a Federation ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Liberty. The heavy cruiser USS Defiant was 3 times larger than the exploration vessel and bristled with weapons. Jake had never been happier to see a military ship. Commander Lisa Parker beamed aboard the Liberty with a team of Federation intelligence officers. She was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had served in Starfleet for over 30 years. Lisa had seen many conflicts during her career, but the destruction of the Zalari colony was something new. "Captain Morrison, your report mentioned unknown attackers," Lisa said as they met in the Liberty's conference room. "We have been tracking similar incidents across the Outer Rim for the past 6 months. Jake felt his stomach drop. If this was part of a larger pattern, then the galaxy faced a threat unlike anything they had seen before. The Federation had dealt with pirates and rogue states, but never systematic attacks on peaceful colonies. Lisa activated a holographic display showing a star map of the local region. Red markers indicated worlds that had been attacked over the past year. Jake counted at least 12 systems, and all of them had been home to peaceful species. "The attackers call themselves the Korthak Empire," Lisa explained. "They are a reptilian species from beyond the galactic rim that has been expanding into Federation space. Their military doctrine focuses on overwhelming force and total destruction of enemy populations." Amy studied the tactical data that Lisa's team had gathered. The Korthak used large fleets of heavily armed ships to attack multiple targets simultaneously. They showed no interest in negotiation or surrender and seemed to view other species as inferior beings to be conquered or eliminated. Dr. Alex Turner arrived on the Liberty the next day to study the aftermath of the attack. He was a xenobiologist who specialized in understanding alien cultures and motivations. Alex had worked with dozens of species during his career, but had never encountered anything like the Korthak. His investigation of the Zalari colony revealed disturbing evidence about Korthak methods. Medical equipment showed signs that the attackers had conducted experiments on captured Zalari before killing them. The research labs contained traces of biological agents that had been tested on the local population. This was not just conquest. Alex reported to Jake and Lisa. The Korthak are treating conquered populations as test subjects for weapons development. They are perfecting techniques for enslaving or eliminating other species. Lisa received new intelligence reports from Federation Command that made the situation even worse. Intercepted. Korthak communications revealed their long-term strategy for dealing with the Federation. They viewed peaceful species as livestock, to be harvested for resources and labor. The Korthak had been studying Federation species for years through captured prisoners and stolen data. They knew which civilizations had strong militaries and which were defenseless. Their plan was to eliminate or enslave the peaceful races first, then challenge the Federation's military powers when they were isolated. Jake felt sick as he read the intelligence summaries. The galaxy that humanity had helped build was based on cooperation and mutual respect between species. The Korthak viewed these same qualities as weaknesses to be exploited. Admiral Claire Johnson at Federation Command tried to organize a diplomatic response to the Korthak threat. She sent envoys offering to negotiate borders and trade agreements that might satisfy their expansionist goals. The Federation had resolved hundreds of conflicts through careful diplomacy over the centuries. The Korthak response came 3 days later. Instead of words, they sent warships to attack 3 more Federation colonies simultaneously. The attacks followed the same pattern as the assault on the Zalari world, with orbital bombardment followed by ground forces that eliminated survivors. News of the attacks spread quickly through Federation space. Member species that had lived in peace for generations suddenly faced the reality that their civilization was under assault. Many worlds began demanding protection, while others talked about negotiating separate peace deals with the Korthak. The galactic community was paralyzed by shock and fear. Most Federation species had small defensive forces designed to deal with pirates and criminals. None of them were prepared for the scale of warfare that the Korthak brought to every battle. Lisa Parker returned to Federation Command to coordinate the military response. She left Alex Turner on the Liberty to continue investigating Korthak methods and technology. His research would be crucial for understanding how to fight an enemy unlike any the Federation had faced. Jake Morrison kept the Liberty in orbit around the ruined Zalari world while his crew continued rescue operations. They had saved nearly 3,000 survivors, but almost 2 million Zalari had died in the attack. The peaceful civilization that had contributed so much to galactic medicine was essentially extinct. As Jake watched the last rescue shuttles return from the planet's surface, he thought about the implications of what they had learned. The Federations, other major military powers, were reluctant to get involved in what they saw as a distant conflict. Humanity might have to face this threat alone. The Federation Council met in emergency session to discuss the Korthak threat, but the debate went nowhere. The crystalline Vorthak wanted to build stronger defenses around their core worlds. The energy-based Luminari suggested retreating to safer regions of space. Only humanity pushed for direct military action against the invaders. Admiral Claire Johnson presented intelligence reports showing that the Korthak were preparing for a massive offensive against Federation space. Their fleets were massing near the galactic rim while scouting ships probed deeper into civilized territory. Time was running out to organize an effective response. 3 weeks after the Zalari colony fell, the Korthak launched their largest attack yet. 50 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel around New Geneva, a major human agricultural world with over 50 million inhabitants. The planet produced food for dozens of other worlds and was considered one of humanity's most important colonies. Captain Sam Davis commanded the USS Vigilant, a patrol ship that happened to be near New Geneva when the attack began. His vessel was no match for a Korthak battle fleet, but he immediately moved to help coordinate evacuation efforts. Civilian transports and cargo ships rushed to the planet's surface to pick up as many people as possible. The Korthak fleet moved, with terrifying efficiency. Their large ships took position in high orbit and began systematic bombardment of population centers. Smaller vessels landed troops at strategic locations to prevent organized resistance. The attack was broadcast live across the galaxy as news networks covered humanity's first major battle with the invaders. Lieutenant Colonel Maya Singh led a Marine unit that was training on New Geneva when the attack started. Her forces were equipped for peacekeeping operations, not fighting a full-scale invasion. Maya organized civilian evacuations, while her Marines tried to slow down advancing Korthak ground troops. The fighting was unlike anything humans had experienced in living memory. Korthak soldiers were larger and stronger than most species with natural armor and razor-sharp claws. They showed no mercy to civilians and seemed to enjoy causing terror and suffering among their victims. Maya's unit made their last stand at a school where thousands of children were waiting for evacuation. Transports. The Korthak forces surrounded the building and began a systematic assault designed to maximize casualties. Maya watched in horror as enemy soldiers executed human children in front of their parents. Her final transmission before the communication network went down became famous across human space. With explosions echoing in the background and enemy fire getting closer, Maya spoke directly to the camera with blood running down her face. "They want to see what humans do when we are not being peaceful," she said in a voice that remained steady despite the chaos around her. "They think we are weak because we choose diplomacy over war. They are about to find out how wrong they are." The transmission cut off as Korthak forces overran the school. Maya Singh and her Marines fought to the last soldier, but could not save the children they had sworn to protect. News of their sacrifice spread through human space within hours. Captain Sam Davis managed to evacuate nearly 2 million people before the planet fell, but over 48 million humans died in the attack. The Korthak forces made no attempt to capture prisoners or preserve infrastructure. They simply killed everything that moved and destroyed everything that remained. President Nathan Brooks addressed both humanity and the galaxy from the capital, world of Earth. His speech was broadcast to every human colony and transmitted to Federation headquarters. The president was known as a quiet man who preferred negotiation to confrontation, but the attack on New Geneva had changed everything. For 200 years, humanity has been proud to serve as peacemakers in this galaxy, Brooks said in a voice that carried barely controlled anger. "We have mediated conflicts, provided aid to those in need, and worked to build a civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect." He paused and looked directly into the camera with eyes that had gone cold and hard. "The Korthak Empire has chosen to interpret our peaceful nature as weakness. They have murdered our children and destroyed our worlds. They believe that humans will not fight back because we have chosen peace for so long." Brooks stood up from his desk and moved to stand in front of a display showing the Federation flag. "Today I am formally declaring war on the Korthak Empire and all who support them. But this will not be the limited warfare that the galaxy is used to seeing." The president's next words sent shockwaves through civilized space. "Humanity is hereby suspending all Federation protocols regarding limitations on warfare. We will not be bound by rules that our enemies ignore. When we fight to win." Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on screens across human space to announce the activation of something called the Sleeping Giant Protocol. Military bases that had been hidden inside civilian infrastructure began revealing themselves. Mining operations opened to disgorge weapons and ships that had been secretly constructed over decades. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity's true military capability became visible for the first time. Trade routes that had carried cargo for centuries were revealed to be supply lines for a massive war machine. Exploration ships began rapid conversion to combat vessels using pre-positioned equipment. General Paul Martinez took command of the newly revealed human defense force. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment while hoping it would never come. The plans and weapons his teams had developed in secret were about to be tested against an enemy that had never faced organized human resistance. Jake Morrison received new orders to report to the nearest military base for ship conversion and crew reassignment. The peaceful exploration mission of the USS Liberty was over. It was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when pushed beyond their limits. The Korthak Empire had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for 2 centuries. They were about to learn why humans had been so careful to avoid war for so long. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of a military base that had been hidden beneath a peaceful research station for over 50 years. Around her, dozens of officers worked at stations that monitored the rapid deployment of humanity's secret military forces. The Sleeping Giant Protocol had been activated, and there was no turning back. The protocol was the result of decades of careful planning by a small group of military leaders who understood that peace in the galaxy might not last forever. While humanity appeared to focus on trade and diplomacy, they had been quietly preparing for the possibility of total war. Mining operations throughout human space began revealing their true purpose. Asteroid facilities that claimed to extract metals for construction had actually been building weapons and ship components. Automated factories hidden in remote systems started producing military equipment at a rate that amazed even their creators. General Paul Martinez reviewed deployment reports from across human territory. Ships were emerging from concealed bases, faster than his staff could catalog them. The vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, incorporating decades of secret research and development. Captain Ryan Torres received command of one of the new warships, the USS Retribution. The ship was sleek and black with weapon systems that could adapt and learn during combat. Ryan had been serving on civilian vessels for years while secretly training for this moment. The USS Retribution and her sister ships represented a completely new approach to space warfare. Human engineers had studied every major battle in galactic history and designed vessels that could counter traditional military tactics. The ships could operate while cloaked, fight in formations that confused enemy targeting systems, and use weapons that became more effective the longer a battle lasted. Amy Rodriguez found herself transferred to the USS Vengeance as tactical officer under Captain Lisa Hayes. The ship was smaller than traditional battle cruisers, but packed more firepower than vessels twice its size. Amy had trained on peaceful exploration ships, but quickly adapted to the aggressive capabilities of her new assignment. The human fleet that assembled near the border of Korthak space looked nothing like the Federation forces that other species were used to seeing. These ships were built for one purpose: to win battles by any means necessary. They carried weapons that violated several galactic treaties and used tactics that most civilized species considered barbaric. Ben Carter worked around the clock to outfit civilian ships with military equipment. Cargo vessels were converted to carry troops and supplies. Passenger ships became mobile command centers. Even scientific research vessels received weapons systems and armor plating. Dr. Alex Turner joined a special unit tasked with understanding Korthak psychology and developing methods to exploit their weaknesses. His research on the destroyed Zalari colony had revealed important information about how the enemy thought and fought. The Korthak Empire had conquered dozens of species over their history, but they had never faced an opponent like humanity. Most of their victims had been peaceful civilizations with little military experience. The few aggressive species they had encountered fought in traditional ways that Korthak forces could easily counter. Human military doctrine was based on principles that other species found disturbing, where most civilizations tried to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. Humans planned to maximize enemy losses and destroy everything that could be used against them. They did not fight to conquer territory, but to eliminate threats completely. Captain Jake Morrison found himself in command of a converted exploration vessel now designated the USS Fury. The ship retained its peaceful appearance but carried enough firepower to destroy small moons. Jake struggled with the transformation from diplomat to warrior, but understood that the survival of his species was at stake. The first human strike force assembled in a system that had appeared empty on all galactic maps. Hidden bases throughout the region supplied the fleet with weapons and information about Korthak movements. Reconnaissance ships had been tracking enemy forces for months while appearing to conduct routine surveys. Ryan Torres led the advance squadron toward the first Korthak target, a forward base that controlled supply lines for their invasion fleets. The base was heavily defended and considered impregnable by conventional military standards. The humans had no intention of using conventional tactics. The attack began with psychological warfare designed to terrify enemy forces before the shooting started. Human ships broadcast recordings of the massacre at New Geneva directly into Korthak communication systems. The messages were accompanied by promises of exactly what would happen to anyone who harmed human civilians. When the actual assault commenced, the Korthak defenders discovered that nothing in their military experience had prepared them for fighting humans. The attacking ships seemed to appear and disappear at will while their weapons fired projectiles that adapted to counter-defensive measures. Human boarding parties that captured sections of the base showed no mercy to enemy soldiers. They had watched recordings of Korthak forces executing human children and responded with cold fury that shocked even their own commanders. Prisoners were taken only when they had useful information to provide. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the broader campaign from her hidden command center. Human forces struck multiple targets simultaneously across a front that stretched for hundreds of light years. The attacks were designed to disrupt Korthak supply lines and eliminate their forward bases before they could organize a coordinated response. The speed and violence of the human offensive caught the Korthak Empire completely off guard. Their military leaders had expected humans to fight defensively and try to negotiate a peaceful solution. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed determined to destroy them utterly. News of the human attacks spread quickly through both Korthak and Federation space. Other galactic civilizations watched with mixture of awe and horror as the peaceful giants they thought they knew revealed capabilities that defied everything they believed about human nature. The Vorthak ambassador to the Federation sent an emergency message to his government warning that they had badly misjudged humanity's military potential. The energy beings of the Luminary began reconsidering their own defensive strategies after seeing what humans could accomplish when they stopped holding back. Within 2 weeks of the first attack, human forces had eliminated a dozen Korthak bases and destroyed over 100 enemy warships. The campaign was conducted with efficiency that impressed military analysts across the galaxy while demonstrating a level of ruthlessness that made even aggressive species uncomfortable. The war escalated to a level of violence that the galaxy had never witnessed in recorded history. Human forces pushed deeper into Korthak space with each passing week, leaving behind them a trail of destroyed bases and shattered fleets. The careful, military doctrine that had taken decades to develop was being tested against an enemy that fought with desperate fury. Colonel Danny Clark led Special Forces teams that infiltrated Korthak worlds to disable infrastructure from within. His soldiers moved through enemy territory like ghosts, striking at power plants, communication centers, and supply depots before vanishing into the darkness. The Korthak had never faced opponents who could operate behind their lines with such effectiveness. Danny's teams used techniques that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They poisoned water supplies with chemicals that caused painful but non-lethal illness. They programmed enemy computers to display images from the massacre at New Geneva. They left recordings of human children crying for their parents in places where Korthak soldiers would find them. Dr. Grace Mitchell worked in secret laboratories developing biological agents specifically designed to target Korthak physiology. Her weapons were engineered not to kill, but to cause maximum suffering among enemy forces. Grace had been a peaceful researcher before the war, but the death of her sister on New Geneva had transformed her into something cold and calculating. The biological weapons that Grace created attacked Korthak nervous systems in ways that produced excruciating pain without causing death. Infected soldiers became unable to fight while remaining conscious enough to experience their agony. The weapons were distributed to human forces as psychological warfare tools. Captain Eric Stone commanded the USS Fury, a vessel equipped with weapons that pushed the boundaries of what physics would allow. His ship could generate gravitational fields strong enough to crush enemy vessels or tear apart planetary surfaces. Eric had volunteered for the assignment because he wanted to ensure that no other human world would suffer the fate of New Geneva. The USS Fury and ships like her represented humanity's willingness to use any weapon necessary to win the war. They carried devices that could destabilize stars, create artificial black holes, and even crack planets open to expose their molten cores. The existence of such weapons was kept secret from Federation allies who would have been horrified by their implications. Human strategy focused on destroying not just Korthak military forces, but their entire civilization. Admiral Sullivan had studied the enemy's culture and determined that they would never accept defeat as long as their society remained intact. The only way to ensure lasting peace was to eliminate their ability to threaten other species permanently. Captain Amy Rodriguez led bombing missions against Korthak cultural sites and religious centers. Her pilots targeted temples, museums, and monuments that held significance for enemy morale. The attacks were designed to break the spirit of Korthak civilization by destroying everything they valued. The bombardment of Korthak cultural targets sent shockwaves through galactic society. Most civilized species tried to preserve the heritage of their enemies even during warfare. Humanity showed no such restraint and made it clear that they intended to erase every trace of Korthak civilization. From the galaxy, Admiral Kelly Barnes broadcast surrender terms to the Korthak High Command through hijacked communication networks. The terms were simple and non-negotiable: complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, payment of reparations to all victims, and submission to permanent human oversight of Korthak military forces. The alternative to surrender was explicitly stated as the complete extinction of the Korthak species. Human forces had demonstrated that they possessed both the capability and the will to carry out such a threat. Recordings of destroyed Korthak worlds were included with the surrender demand to show that humans were not bluffing. Korthak military leaders initially rejected the surrender terms and attempted to organize a counteroffensive against human forces. Their fleets gathered in the core systems of their empire, while civilian populations were evacuated to supposedly secure locations. The Korthak believed that humans would follow traditional military practices and avoid targeting non-combatants. Human intelligence networks had penetrated Korthak society so thoroughly that every enemy plan was known before it could be implemented. Captain Jake Morrison led raids against the evacuation sites while Korthak military forces were deployed elsewhere. Civilian populations found themselves defenseless against human attacks that showed no mercy for non-combatants. The systematic targeting of Korthak civilians shocked other galactic powers and forced them to reconsider their relationship with humanity. The Vorthak ambassador privately admitted to his government that they had always assumed humans were weak because they chose peace, never considering that they might be choosing peace because they understood what they were capable of. In war, luminary energy beings began withdrawing from regions of space near human territory. Their ancient civilization had survived for millions of years by avoiding conflicts with dangerous species. They recognized that humanity had become something that even they feared to provoke. Ben Carter supervised the construction of prison camps on conquered Korthak worlds where survivors were held under conditions that barely met the definition of humane treatment. The camps were designed to break the spirit of enemy populations while providing labor for reconstruction projects in human space. Dr. Alex Turner developed programs for re-educating captured Korthak children to serve human interests. young prisoners, were separated from their families and raised in facilities that eliminated their natural aggressive instincts. The goal was to create a generation of Korthak servants who would never threaten peace again. The Korthak Empire began to collapse as human forces closed in on their core worlds. Planetary governors surrendered without fighting rather than face the destruction that resistance would bring. Military units deserted their posts and fled to neutral space, hoping to escape the advancing human fleets. Within 18 months of declaring war, humanity had reduced the mighty Korthak Empire to a collection of refugee camps and occupied territories. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for generations found themselves completely at the mercy of the peaceful giants they had chosen to awaken. President Nathan Brooks prepared to address the galaxy about the new order that would emerge. From the ashes of the war, humanity had proven that they could destroy any threat to galactic peace, but now they faced the challenge of deciding what to do with their newfound power. The Korthak homeworld surrendered without firing a shot when human fleets arrived in orbit around their capital. The once mighty empire that had terrorized dozens of species now existed only as scattered refugee populations and devastated worlds under human occupation. Commander Jake Patterson took control of the surrender ceremony with a coldness that reflected humanity's transformation during the war. The terms of surrender were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Korthak species would be relocated to reservation worlds under permanent human supervision. Their military would be disbanded and their weapons destroyed. Most importantly, their children would be raised in human-controlled facilities to eliminate the aggressive culture that had made them a threat. President Nathan Brooks addressed the galactic community from the ruins of the Korthak Capitol building. Behind him, smoke still rose from government buildings that human forces had systematically destroyed. His words carried across space to every civilization that had watched humanity's transformation from peaceful mediators to galactic conquerors. The Korthak Empire chose to interpret our peaceful nature as weakness, Brooks said in a voice that remained calm despite the destruction surrounding him. They believed that species like humanity could be safely terrorized and enslaved. Today marks the end of that belief system forever. Brooks outlined what he called the human doctrine, a new set of principles that would govern humanity's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Humans would remain peaceful and cooperative with civilizations that respected the rights of others, but any species that chose to harm innocent beings would face the full weight of human military power. The doctrine sent shockwaves through galactic society. Peaceful species welcomed the protection that human power could provide. Aggressive civilizations began reconsidering expansion plans that might bring them into conflict with humanity. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Admiral Kate Sullivan established the Terran Fleet as a permanent military force that would patrol galactic space and respond to threats against peaceful civilizations. The fleet's ships bore a motto that became famous throughout the galaxy: peace through superior firepower. The message was clear that humans would maintain order through strength rather than negotiation. Captain Ryan Torres found himself commanding patrol squadrons that other species both respected and feared. His ships appeared without warning in systems where aggressive actions had been reported. The mere presence of human vessels was often enough to end conflicts before they could escalate. Dr. Jennifer Walsh took charge of the Department of Xenological Warfare, research facilities that other species were forbidden to approach. The official purpose was studying defensive technologies, but everyone knew that humans continued developing weapons capable of ending entire civilizations. The facilities served as a reminder that humanity's restraint was a choice, not a limitation. The galaxy adapted to the new reality with mixture of relief and terror. Trade flourished, as aggressive species found themselves unable to threaten peaceful merchants. Scientific cooperation increased as research stations no longer needed to fear attack. But every species understood that their safety depended on staying in humanity's good graces, Colonel Danny Clark supervised the re-education camps where young Korthak learned to serve human interests. The programs were designed to eliminate aggressive instincts while preserving useful skills. Within a generation, the Korthak would become a client species completely dependent on human approval for survival. Ben Carter managed the reconstruction of conquered territories using forced labor from prisoner populations. Former Korthak military bases were converted into monitoring stations that watched for signs of renewed aggression. The message was clear that humanity would never again allow such a threat to develop. Dr. Grace Mitchell continued her biological weapons research in case other aggressive species needed to be reminded of human capabilities. Her laboratory produced diseases that could target specific genetic markers while leaving allied populations unharmed. The weapons were never used, but their existence was quietly communicated to potential threats. Captain Amy Rodriguez received a distress call while patrolling the Outer Rim territories. A peaceful mining colony was being threatened by raiders who demanded tribute payments. Amy's response demonstrated how completely human attitudes toward such situations had changed. She arrived at the threatened system with a single destroyer and broadcast a message to the raiders. They had one opportunity to leave immediately or face the consequences of threatening innocent beings. When the raiders laughed and demanded that she retreat, Amy's response was swift and absolute. The raider ships simply vanished. No explosions, no debris, no distress signals. One moment they existed, and the next they were gone, as if they had never been there at all. Amy filed a report stating that the threat had been neutralized and continued her patrol without further comment. News of the incident spread quickly through criminal networks across the galaxy. Raiders and pirates who had operated freely for generations suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that offered no second chances. Many simply abandoned their ships and sought honest employment rather than risk encountering human patrols. Captain Laura Hughes commanded border patrol missions along the edge of human space, where refugees from the war struggled to rebuild their lives. Her ships provided aid to legitimate settlements while watching for signs that former enemies might be organizing resistance movements. The refugee camps contained survivors from dozens of species that had been enslaved by the Korthak Empire. Human forces had liberated these populations during the war, but many struggled to adapt to freedom after generations of oppression. Hughes worked to ensure that they received the support needed to rebuild their civilizations. Children across the galaxy learned new bedtime stories that replaced traditional tales of heroes and monsters. The new stories featured humans who protected the innocent while dealing ruthlessly with those who caused harm. The stories always ended with the same lesson about what happened to creatures that hurt peaceful beings. Admiral Sullivan reviewed reports from patrol squadrons operating throughout galactic space. Human presence had become so effective at preventing conflicts that military incidents between other species had dropped to almost zero. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, but everyone understood that this peace existed only because humanity was willing to enforce it. The final transformation was complete when the Federation Council formally recognized human authority over galactic security matters. Other species could focus on trade, science, and cultural development, while humanity handled the unpleasant business of dealing with threats. It was an arrangement that satisfied everyone except those who had aggressive intentions. The phrase, that had begun as a warning to the Korthak Empire, became common knowledge throughout the stars. When humanity decides to fight, there is no mercy. It was a lesson that every species learned and none forgot. The peaceful giants had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.